Okay, so this podcast is just me going over the questions that are on the review for test one. So if you need to watch this entire podcast, that's fine. If you need to just fast forward to the questions, the problems that you have questions about, that's fine too. I'm gonna go through each question that's on the review that I gave you. All right, so we'll just start at one and go through. So I'm going to go through and solve here. So I'll distribute out the 6, or the negative 6. So I'll have 30 minus 60b. And I'll distribute out the negative 10. So negative 30b minus 90 plus 10b. And then I'm going to combine like terms with the negative 30 and the 10. I just like to put the b's first. All right, so I'm going to move the b's over to the right. So I'll get 40b equals 120. And I can multiply or divide by the 40. So b equals 3. Right, number 2. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to distribute first. So I have this n, and then distributing out the negative 3, I'll have negative 3n minus 12. And over here, negative 6n plus 42. I'm going to combine my n's first here and get negative 2n. And I'll combine here and get negative 8n. All right, so 6n, and then I'll bring the 12 to the other side. So 54, and divide by the 6. So n equals 9. Okay, number 3, again, start by distributing. So I'll have 18k, 2 negatives make a positive 54. And then I'll distribute here. So negative 16k plus 20. And then I'm going to go through and solve. So I think I'll move my k's over to the left. I get, what is that, 34k, and then I'll subtract the 54. Okay, negative 34, and divide by the 34. So k equals negative 1. All right, one more solving, number 4. Again, I'm going to start by distributing and distributing here. Okay, clean it up a little bit. I think the only thing I can do is combine those. Like I said before, I just like to put the r's first. It just helps me kind of keep it separate in my head, so I'm going to do that. And then here I'll have 74. All right, get the r's on one side of the equal sign, so I'm going to move them over here to the left and get 3r. So I'll move the 35 to the other side. That'll give me what, 39? And divide by the 3. So r equals 13. All right, make sure you can solve. You'll see that on your test. Okay, simplifying. I'm going to go through here and start with parentheses. Now, it's like there's parentheses on the top and on the bottom, so I can go ahead and do the top, and that's fine. So I'll have 7 minus 3 is 4, plus a negative 4 is 0, plus 6 is 6. And then in the bottom, I need to do this parentheses first. So I'll have 3 minus 1 plus a negative 1 is 2, minus 2 is 0. So I end up with 6 minus 0, which is 6. Dividing, I'll get 1. All right, going through to simplify here. So I'm going to do the top first and the bottom, and then I'll divide. Just remember 2 negatives make a positive. I've got that 2 places. So So then I need to do, let me write out what I have because it kind of, since I have multiplication here, I do want to make sure that I do that before addition or subtraction. So I'll have 6 plus 6, which means in the top I have 12. Down here I have 4 minus 5 is a negative 1 plus 3 is 3. So 4. Okay, number 7. Now this time I'm giving you an expression, not an equation. So you can't solve this. All you can do is simplify. So I'm going to distribute here. Oops, distribute here. And distribute here. And then I can combine like terms. So combining my x's, I get negative 18x. Combining my numbers, plus 11. Okay, I'm going to distribute. So negative 3x plus 6. Negative 20x plus 5. And then again, combine. So negative 23x plus 11. All right. Evaluating, again, it's an expression. I know what x and y are, so I'm going to plug those in. So I'm going to go ahead and do 6 divided by 6 is 1. I've still got the negative here. Okay, y is negative 8. X is negative 6. Now I need to do multiplication before I do addition and subtraction. So I'll multiply these. Now there's 3 negatives, so I know it's going to end up being negative. And then I have 2 times 8 is 16. 16 times 6 is 96. So negative 97. Okay, again, I'm going to plug in. Now just a heads up, this is an x, not a multiplication sign. So is this. All right, so I have 8. Maybe I need to double check that. No, I'm sorry. This is a multiplication sign. Just a heads up, I did double check on your test. I didn't give you any that are kind of gray area where it's kind of hard to tell what an x and a multiplication sign are. I didn't give you any that you won't be able to tell. So it is 8 times this right here. I'm going to go ahead and do 4 divided by 4 and get negative 1. X is negative 10. Z is negative 9. Okay, so I'll have negative 18 minus 9 is a negative 27. All right, here we are solving the inequality. In addition to solving, we do need to graph it on the number line. So graph its solution. All right, so I'm going to distribute out the 4. And then I've got my plus 1. Okay, let me combine the 4 and the 1. So I'll get 5. And then go through and solve. So subtract there. Don't forget, when you divide by a negative, you flip the inequality sign. Okay, don't forget that. You might see it on your test. Okay, last thing I'm going to do is graph it. So at 3, that gave me a little hint because I said 3, but 3's not on this graph. I made a mistake right here. This should have been negative 3 because this 12 was negative. All right. So negative 3, and I'm going to shade where it's less than or equal to. So shade that way. Okay, number 12. I'm going to start the same way, distribute out the 4. So 12p is less than 36. So P is less than 3. Okay, so here's 3, open circle, and I'm going to shade where it's less than. Okay, inequalities, you will see them on your test. Okay, compound inequality. So I'm going to solve each of these, then we'll worry about graphing it on the number line. So I'm going to add the 4. Oops, I'm going to write tiny, it doesn't do well with my tablet. So I'll get negative 10, divide by the 5. So x is greater than negative 2. All right, I'm going to bring down the and from up there. Okay, add the 3. So negative 3x is greater than negative 12. Don't forget, when you divide by a negative, make sure you flip that inequality sign. 2 negatives make a positive. Okay, let me erase this since I'm graphing and I'll make sure nothing's in the way. Okay, so at negative 2, and then I'm going to shade where it's greater than. At 4, and I'm going to shade where it's less than. Now this is and. It makes sense it would look like this because this is what and typically looks like. All right, so here's my graph on the number line. Here's my solution. Now on the quiz, I noticed that several people left out bringing down the word and. You want to bring that word down so that you're saying what it generally is going to look like. So bring that word down, okay? It's part of your answer. Okay, going through to solve here, I'm going to do the same thing pretty much. So add the 4, so 6x is less than negative 42. X is less than negative 7. Okay, this time it's or. Bring that down. All right, I'm going to subtract the 4. So I have negative 2x is less than or equal to 0. And I'll divide by the negative 2. Okay, when you divide by the negative, make sure you flip that inequality sign. All right, again, I'm going to erase these numbers up here. So let's go through and graph this. It's or, so I think I know what it should look like. All right, so open circle, I'm going to shade where it's less than, so this way. At 0, closed in circle, I'm going to shade where it's greater than or equal to. That's why I did the closed in circle. All right, so here's my answer. Again, don't forget to bring down the word or. Here's my picture, which makes sense because it looks like your typical or situation. Okay, we're still solving inequalities. This time, though, we're doing it with absolute values. So I'm going to go through, set up my 2 equations, or 2 inequalities. So I'll have 27 and negative 27. A less than, leave it the same. With the negative, I'll flip it. And then I'm pretty much just going to go through and solve these. So negative 6n is less than 24. Divide by the negative 6. Don't forget to flip your inequality. Okay, same kind of thing here. Negative 6n is greater than negative 30. Okay, I divided by a negative, so I'm going to flip that inequality, and I'll get 5. Okay, so let me graph each of these. I know I'm going to have one at negative 4 and one at 5. Here, it's greater than, so greater than negative 4, less than 5. So I'm talking about in between the two, which means I want to put the word and in between them because this is the and situation. If it had been going like this, that's the or situation. I would have used or here. Since mine looks like this, it's and. This is and, this is or in terms of kind of what it looks like. Okay, one more of these. I need to plug my computer in, so hold on one second. Okay, so one more of these. So I'm going to go through and again put the 7x plus 3, the stuff in the absolute value twice, 25, negative 25. Okay, on the positive, I'm going to leave it as is. On the negative, I'm going to flip the inequality sign. Okay, I'll keep the equal to, I'll just flip the sign part. And then I'm going to solve each of these. Okay, divide by the 7. Okay, you could get fractions every now and again. Don't be afraid of them, it can happen. I wrote this as a mixed number because I've got to graph it on here. Okay, so 7x. Okay, at least both of them aren't fractions. So here I'll get negative 4. Okay, let's graph these to decide if it's and or. Okay, so positive 3 and a 7th. I just have to estimate where it is. I'll go ahead and put negative 4 on there. Okay, the 3 and a 7th, it's greater than or equal to. And the negative 4, it's less than, which means it's the or situation. Okay, I don't have a problem with 22 over 7, but it's going to be hard to know where to graph that on the number line is the reason I changed it to a mixed number. Okay, 17. 17 is absolute value again, but this time it's with an equation, an equal sign versus an inequality. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my absolute value by itself. So I'm going to add the 2. So I'll have negative 5, absolute value of 5r plus 2 equals negative 30. Now I know this is a negative, that was a negative, but I've got to get it, the absolute value by itself before I make any decisions on anything. I'm going to divide by the negative 5. So 4r plus 2 equals 6. And then I'll set up my 2 things. Okay, so equals 6 and equals negative 6, and I'll solve each of these. So subtract the 2. R equals 1, divide by the 4. And let's see what happens here. So 4r equals negative 8. So r equals negative 2. All right, now if you want to check your answer, you can. However, mathematically, you do not have to check your answer because it doesn't have an r inside the absolute value and outside the absolute value. It only has one inside. So you don't have to mathematically. You can if you want to. Oh my, I was not very nice to you guys. I gave y'all a fraction. But you know what? We can deal with fractions. So let's go through, get this simplified a little bit, and then make a goal to cancel the fractions out. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and distribute here. So this is like 3 over 1. So the 3's will cancel, and I'll have 8p minus here, nothing will cancel, so I'll have 40 over 9. And then over here I have 340 over 9. Okay, and then I think I'm going to go ahead and combine like terms here. So I'll have 10p minus 40 over 9 equals negative 340 over 9. Okay. Now feel free to use your calculator if you need to. The numbers might get a little bit big. But I'm going to multiply through by 9. I can multiply by whatever I want. I'm going to choose 9 so that my 2 fractions cancel out. So I'll have 90p minus 40 equals negative 340. And then I'm going to solve for my p. Now I want to remind y'all, that little fraction trick can save you a lot of time and energy and stress. Make sure you get this calculator trick down, not calculator, fraction trick down. cancel the zeros, so I'll have negative 30 over 9, and then I can reduce by 3 again, so I'll get negative 10 over 3. So divide each of them by 3. Okay, now I'm going to tell y'all, I put a fraction 1 on your test. You can do it. Make sure you study it. Okay, number 19. It says, Natalie left the movie theater 1 hour before Imani. They drove in opposite directions. Okay, so there's Natalie. There's Imani. Imani drove at 35 kilometers per hour for 2 hours. After this time, they were 139 kilometers apart. Find Natalie's speed. Okay, so we need to take Natalie's distance and Imani's distance, and they ended up 139 kilometers apart. Now remember, when we go through and do our distances, distance equals rate times time. I'm not going to give you that formula. You can make sure you have it in your head. Distance equals rate times time. So I'm going to find Natalie's distance first, and then I'm going to find Imani's. Actually, I'll probably do them sort of together. I want to start with time, because Imani's time, I know. She drove for 2 hours. Now, Natalie left the movie theater 1 hour before Imani, so Natalie drove for 3 hours, because she left an hour earlier. They ended up, and then they both drove 2 hours. Okay, in terms of their speed, we're supposed to find Natalie's speed, or rate, so I'm going to call that x. They told us Imani's, 35 kilometers per hour. So this really equals 70. Let's plug these in. So Natalie, her distance is 3 times x. Imani's distance, I had both pieces, it was 70. And they're 139 kilometers apart. So I'm going to solve this. So 3x equals 69, and divide by 3. Okay, so this number is, I called it x here, but it's Natalie's rate or Natalie's speed. So that's what they asked us for. So Natalie's going 23 kilometers per hour. Okay, find 3 consecutive numbers whose sum is just 96. I was thinking 196. All right, so if I add the 3 numbers together, I'll get 96. All right, so I'm going to call this x. I'm going to call this x plus 1. I'm going to call this x plus 2. So 1, 2, 3, x plus 3, combine like terms, and then I'll solve. So 3x equals 93, x equals, when you divide by 3, x equals 31. So my numbers are 31, 32, 33. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. There is no reason to not double check that. You might as well add these numbers together and make sure you get 96, because that will take you 2 seconds and it will save you from knowing if you did the question correctly or not. So if you have one of these on the test, you might as well add those numbers together and make sure you get 96, which I'll tell you here you do. But on the test, you may want to check that if you have one like this. Okay, 21, again, an absolute value equation. This one has an x inside the absolute value and one outside the absolute value. We have to check this problem. Remember, you have to check them when you've got an absolute value inside and outside. So I'm going to set up my 2 equations. Okay, so this is x plus 1. This is a negative version of that. And then I'm going to go through and solve. Okay, so there's my first answer. over here. Have 3x equals -4. So -4/3. Okay, I am not done. I need to make sure that I check each of those and see if they work. So I'm going to check the -2 first. So I'm just going to store it as x. And then I can type in each side of the equal sign. Okay, so absolute value of the left was 2x plus 3. You can see it right there behind my calculator. And I got 1. Plugging in the other side is x plus 1. And I get -1. Now that tells me that this is not a good answer. It's, big fancy word, extraneous. Okay, so I'm throwing it out. Let's check the -4/3. So -4/3, store as x. And then I'm going to put in both sides. So get my absolute value of 2x plus 3. And I got 0.3 repeating, which is 1/3. And then I'll have x plus 1. So I end up with negative version of what I started with, which means this is not a good answer either. Okay, remember I told you if you wanted to call it empty set, you could. I tossed out both my answers. Okay, I told you all this in class. I'm going to tell you again. You have to check your work. You have to check your work. There's an x inside the absolute value, 1 outside the absolute value. You have to check your work. Okay, another absolute value with an equal sign. I want you to notice that an absolute value is set equal to a negative. That is not possible because whatever you get when you take the absolute value here has to be a positive number. It cannot equal -10. So this is no solution. Or if you want to write out no solution, that's fine too. Okay, 23. So here we are supposed to solve for w. So I'm going to subtract the 2l. And divide by the 2. So w equals p minus 2l over 2. Sometimes I'll have people who ask me if I can cancel the 2's. You cannot here because you don't have a 2 in front of the p as well. That 2 belongs to both terms. So if you can't cancel both places, then you can't cancel it all. Okay, and here I am supposed to solve for x. There's the x. So I'm going to multiply by y, get rid of my fraction, and then I'll go through and solve for my x. So I'm going to add 3. So yz plus 3 equals 2x, and then divide by 2. So yz plus 3 over 2 is x. Okay, 25. All right, this is the messy one of these. We're doing the same thing as the last problem, but I'm solving for x, and there's 2 of them. So let's go ahead and distribute first, and we'll decide what to do. All right, so I have ax minus 3a, and then I've got that plus 8, and bx minus b. b times 1 is 1b, or just b. And let me highlight my x's again. All right, so I'm going to make my goal to get the terms that have x's in them on the left-hand side of the equal sign. Okay, so I have ax minus bx. And then I'll move this other stuff to the right. So plus 3a be able to combine those because this is a B, this is an A, but I wrote it there anyway. And then a minus 8. So I think I'll start with the 3A since it's positive, minus B minus 8. Okay, now here's the reason that I did that. Let me highlight the X's again. The reason I organized it this way is so that I can pull out an X. And when I pull out an X, I have something I can divide by, so I'll be able to solve. So I'm going to divide by the A minus B. All right, so I have all this stuff. I'm just going to rewrite it pretty much. There we go. And 26. So on this one, we're supposed to find the domain and the range. Now remember, with domain, you're going to be thinking side to side. So sometimes it's helpful to have like a little line. I'm going to make a little line here and see if I'll be able to drag it. Nah, this is the problem I had before. I'm going to have to shift from down here. So you're thinking across here. So my smallest value is -4, but I'm not including -4, so I'm going to put a parentheses. The parentheses is like an open circle. It does not include it. And then I've got X values, domain is X values, all in here until I get right there at 3. Now I do have a value at 3. It's a closed-in circle. If I move this away, you'll see it's a closed-in circle. So I'm going to put a bracket that means it's a closed-in circle. Okay, now let's do range. Now range is the Y values. So I'm going to use a line going up and down. Let me move this over just a little bit. Well, maybe I won't. Okay, so here I'm taking this line, I'm moving it up and down. So the smallest Y value I have is right there at -5. It's an open circle, so I'm not going to include it. And then I have Y values. The problem I always have, I can never get a hold of this thing. I have Y values all in here until I get right there at 2. Okay, so it goes to 2. I've got a value right there. It's not an open circle, so I'm going to use a bracket. The bracket means I'm including it. All right, that is the last one. Make sure that you study for your test. Happy studying.